break your arm, and X-ray gives you this clean, jagged white line. Broken or not.
Right, it's undeniable.
Yeah, exactly. And the doctor points to it, they slap a cast on it, and they give you a timeline. And that is incredibly comforting, because it's just so visible.
It's quantifiable.
But what happens when you step into the murky, really terrifying world of severe neurological trauma?
Oh, that is a completely different universe.
It really is. Like, what happens when the monitors say your body is resting peacefully, but inside your mind is just screaming in the dark?
That is the paradox of it all.
So today, for you listening, we are diving straight into that terrifying gap, that space between physiological reality and psychological experience.
And it is arguably the most complex frontier in modern medicine. We're going to be looking at the really intricate biological reality of comas and the incredibly arduous 10-stage journey of traumatic brain injury or TBI recovery.
And to really understand what those 10 stages look like from the inside out, we've pulled a pretty fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive. We've got clinical medical literature that details the exact mechanisms of comatose states and the TBI recovery scale. But we're pairing that data with Troy St. James's gripping fiction novel, In Darkness We Sleep.
Which is such a brilliant way to digest the clinical data, honestly.
It really grounds it. The novel gives us Jason Matherson, who acts as our proxy. He basically drags us through the visceral, first-hand experience of being locked inside a damaged mind.
But before we get into Jason's mind, we do need to put a quick mandatory disclaimer out there for you.
Oh, right. Yes, let's get that out of the way.
The information we're discussing today is strictly for educational purposes, so please do not take anything we explore here as a medical diagnosis.
Absolutely. Good call. Okay, so let's put ourselves right in Jason Matherson's shoes. In the novel, Jason is a 30-year-old soldier, peak physical condition.
Prime of his life.
Right. But he suffers this catastrophic accident, and he ends up at Columbia Hospital in Denver. He's relying on mechanical ventilation to breathe and PICC lines.
Which are essentially long-term deep vein IVs for all his nutrition.
Yeah, and he wakes up after being in this state for 2 whole years.
2 years.
So let's tackle the elephant in the room first. How is a 2-year coma even biologically possible?
It's a great question.
Because I always assumed, a coma was like a ticking clock. You either wake up in a few weeks or the brain just kind of expires.
Yeah, that is a very common misconception, driven mostly by Hollywood. I mean, movies love a ticking clock.
Right.
But medically speaking, there is no inherent expiration date on a coma.
Really? None at all?
None. The brain doesn't have a biological timer that suddenly rings and shuts the body down. Survival for years, or in some really rare cases, decades, depends entirely on 3 crucial factors.
Okay, what are they?
The underlying cause of the trauma, the initial severity of the brain damage, and, most importantly for long-term survival, the quality of the medical interventions keeping the physical vessel, the body, stable.
Wait, so if there's no timer on the brain, what actually dictates the outcome? Like, why do some people not make it if the brain itself isn't just giving up?
Because of the rest of the body. Patients in long-term comatose states face immense vulnerability, not necessarily from the brain injury itself, but from secondary medical complications.
Oh, I see, because they aren't moving.
Exactly. When you are completely immobile and reliant on machines for years, your risk for severe infections just skyrockets.
Like what kind of infections?
Pneumonia is a massive killer in these scenarios. So are deep vein blood clots or bed sores that lead to sepsis or eventual organ failure.
That is so bleak.
It is. The advanced life support and meticulous nutritional care Jason receives in the book, that is the sole biological reason his body doesn't succumb to those secondary failures over 24 months.
Okay, that actually makes a scene early in the book make so much more sense to me now.
Which scene?
The one where Dr. Wells is talking to Jason, and he notes that the coma was actually quite, quote, handy. He says it keeps the patient from suffering while the body focuses entirely on healing. But I read that and thought, how does being in a coma actually help the brain heal?
Well, think about how much energy your brain uses right now.
Okay.
Just to, process my voice, look at the room around you, formulate your next thought.
A lot, I'm guessing.
A massive amount. Consciousness is metabolically incredibly expensive. So when the brain suffers massive trauma, it swells. It is literally bruised.
And there's nowhere for it to go because of the skull.
Right. If it continues trying to run all the high-level conscious processes while swelling inside those rigid confines, the intracranial pressure can become fatal.
Right.
So by shutting down consciousness or having doctors medically induce a coma, the brain diverts all that cellular energy away from thinking and feeling and redirects it entirely towards cellular repair and reducing inflammation.
Okay, let me see if I have this right. So being in a long-term coma isn't like hitting a pause button on a video game where you just resume perfectly later.
Not at all.
It's more like keeping a severely damaged ship afloat with heavy-duty life support, while the crew desperately patches the hull from the inside.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it, yeah.
Like they've turned off the radar, the communications, the engines, just to route all power to emergency repairs.
Exactly. All power is routed to survival.
Yeah.
But patching the hull takes an agonizing amount of time.
Which brings us to, honestly, the most terrifying part of this deep dive.
The waking up part.
Yes. Okay, the life support keeps the body from failing. The hull is patched. But physically keeping someone alive doesn't explain how the mind actually turns the lights back on.
No, it doesn't.
How does someone cross from total silent darkness back to reality? Because for Jason, that transition is a literal nightmare.
The clinical literature calls this the emergence from disorders of consciousness. And you're right, the internal transition is rarely peaceful. It is a profound sensory struggle.
In the prologue, Jason's internal experience is horrifying. He is trapped in total darkness.
Just utter isolation.
His mind is racing, but his body is completely immobile. The tension is just maddening. He tries to scream, "When will it end?" But obviously, his vocal cords do nothing.
Because the motor connections are severed.
Right. He even imagines holding a pistol and squeezing off a round, just hoping the sheer concussive energy of the gunshot will carry his voice into the void.
Wow, yeah.
But all he hears back from the darkness is the word never.
What the author is doing there is capturing the absolute terror of sensory deprivation when the brain first begins to, spark back to life.
But the physical disconnect is what really got to me as a reader.
How so?
He panics over the deafening sound of his own heartbeat. Just this booming whump, whump, piercing his eardrums.
Right, because there's no other sensory input.
Exactly. But when he focuses his attention on his chest, he can't feel it heaving. He can't physically feel his own racing heart.
That disconnect is fascinating.
He just slips back and forth between this blackness and these vivid, disjointed dreams of his father driving a blue sedan. He is literally testing his reality by trying to twitch imaginary fingers, wondering, am I dead?
If we map Jason's internal monologue onto the clinical stages of TBI recovery, we see a textbook progression here.
Oh, really? So this lines up with the medical data?
Perfectly. When he is in that total blackness, experiencing complete unresponsiveness with no eye movement, the medical literature classifies that as stage 1 coma.
So the brain is entirely shut down to external stimuli.
Right. But
Yeah.
then he starts having those periods of dreaming and waking in the dark.
Yeah, the blue sedan dream.
Yes. That shift represents stage 2. Historically, this was called the vegetative state, though neurologists now prefer the term unresponsive wakefulness syndrome.
Unresponsive wakefulness.
Basic autonomic reflexes return. In this stage, a patient might actually open their eyes. They establish sleep-wake cycles.
Wait, hold on. I'm confused here.
Okay, what's confusing?
If your eyes are literally open and you're going to sleep and waking up, aren't you by definition conscious? Like, how can you be awake but nobody is home?
It is one of the most haunting phenomena in neurology. You have to separate the brain into 2 basic components to understand this.
Okay.
You have the brainstem, which controls automatic functions like breathing, heart rate, and sleep cycles. And then you have the cerebral cortex, which controls awareness, thought, and personality.
So they get disconnected.
Exactly. In unresponsive wakefulness syndrome, the brainstem is working. The body wakes up and opens its eyes.
But the cortex is offline.
Right. The connections to the cortex are still severed or dormant. There is zero environmental awareness.
That is terrifying. So his eyes might literally be open in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
But internally, his cortex is just trapped hearing the whomp, whomp, wonk of his heart in an endless void.
What's fascinating here is that terrifying discrepancy between a patient's hidden internal cognitive activity and their complete external unresponsiveness. It's incredibly difficult to diagnose.
Because the family members see the eyes open and think the person is back.
Right, but the conscious mind is still locked in the dark.
But then Jason hits stage 3, minimally conscious state. In the book, the grayness turns into this stinging white hospital light.
The visual cortex starts processing real input.
Yeah, he's drifting in and out, but he can hear his mother's voice saying, "He's still in there." And Jason finally, desperately, manages to mouth a purposeful word. He mouths the name Marley.
And that is the pivotal biological milestone.
Just mouthing a word.
Yes, mouthing a specific word or blinking purposefully against a bright light separates stage 3 from stage 2. He's no longer just reflexively awake.
His cortex is actually doing something.
His cortex is finally making successful, albeit fragile, connections to his motor functions. He is beginning to consciously interact with his environment.
But here's the thing that really surprised me in the sources. Opening your eyes and speaking a word isn't the finish line.
Oh, not even close.
Because I think a lot of us take for granted that waking up from a coma means you just, slowly stretch, ask what year it is, and you're back.
Right, the TV version of a coma.
Yeah. But waking up is really just the starting gun for a highly disorienting cognitive maze.
Waking up is merely the transition from passive survival to active, grueling rehabilitation. The brain is online, but the neural pathways are an absolute mess.
And we see this hit Jason like a freight train in chapters 2 and 3. He wakes up almost completely deaf, so he's constantly shouting at the ceiling just to hear himself.
Which is common. Auditory processing is a mess.
And physically, he discovers he has monoplegia. His left arm is completely paralyzed. He describes it as hanging there like a sock full of pennies.
What a vivid description.
Right. But the cognitive maze is even wilder. Nurse Rachel is in the room, and she accidentally slips up and mentions the accident.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and Jason scowls at her and says, "Huh? Was I in a car accident?"
Mm-hmm.
He has absolutely no idea what she's talking about.
This brings us to the post-traumatic confusional state, which encompasses stages 4, 5, and 6 on the recovery scale.
So what Jason is experiencing with Nurse Rachel
Is stage 4 post-traumatic amnesia.
So his brain just deleted the credit, like hitting delete on a file.
It's more complex than a simple deletion. Severe trauma disrupts the hippocampus, which is the brain's memory center.
Okay.
Patients in stage 4 often suffer from both retrograde amnesia, an inability to recall events leading up to the injury, and anterograde amnesia, which is the inability to form new memories after waking up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the sheer neurochemical chaos in the brain prevents memories from encoding properly.
Okay, but the next stage, stage 5, is marked by inappropriate behavior. And I really want to push on this because it feels so counterintuitive to me.
How so?
Okay, if I'm standing by a hospital bed and my loved one has been in a quiet, peaceful coma for 2 years and they finally wake up.
You're expecting a joyful reunion?
Exactly. But instead of a joyful reunion, they don't know who I am. They are shouting, they're agitated, they're thrashing around, or saying things that make zero sense. I am going to panic.
Of course you are.
I'm going to hit the call button and assume their brain is bleeding or they're getting worse.
Yeah.
But you're saying that medically, this agitation is actually a step forward.
It is a massive step forward, even though it is profoundly traumatic for the family to witness.
How does that make sense?
Let's look at the biology of why this happens. When the brain wakes up, the lights are on, but the wiring is short-circuiting.
Okay.
Neurons are firing wildly, releasing floods of neurotransmitters like glutamate, trying to force information through damaged or severed pathways.
So it's like, imagine a city where the main highways have all been blown up by an earthquake.
That's a good analogy.
And suddenly all that high-speed traffic is trying to detour through tiny, winding residential streets. It's just massive gridlock and chaos.
That is exactly what is happening on a cellular level. The brain is highly stimulated by the waking world, but it lacks the internal infrastructure to process and filter that stimulation.
So they just act out.
Right. It results in extreme agitation, emotional outbursts, or complete flatlining of emotion. It is chaotic, but it proves the brain is actively attempting to route signals.
And eventually, that gridlock starts to clear up, which leads to stage 6, right? Confusion.
Yes. The extreme agitation subsides, and patients can hold short conversations.
Like Jason talking to Dr. Wells.
Exactly. But he still severely lacks focus and orientation.
Yeah, the staff has to constantly test his reality. Like, they ask for his name, his location.
It's a grounding technique.
Right, there's a young chipper nurse who tests him. She says, "You're in Denver at Columbia Hospital." And Jason is just grasping for anchors.
He's trying to build a foundation.
He thinks, I know my name is Jason Matherson. I was born in Denver. I'm in the Army. But once that severe confusion finally lifts and he knows who he is and where he is, that's when the real marathon begins. Stages 7 through 10.
Yes, the active rehabilitation phase. This is arguably the longest, most physically demanding part of the entire journey.
And the book does not shy away from how brutal this is. The physical therapy scenes are incredibly intense.
They usually are.
These two guys from the basement gym, Jay and Jeff, come up to Jason's room. Jeff has these huge arms covered in tribal tattoos, and they are not gentle at all.
No, they can't afford to be.
They aggressively pull on Jason's limbs. They literally force his doughy body forward to do sit-ups in the hospital bed just to combat the severe muscle weakness in his neck and back.
It sounds harsh, but it's necessary.
But why do they have to be so rough? Can't the body just naturally heal with time and rest?
Not when we are talking about rebuilding neural networks. At stage 7, the automatic stage, patients can follow a schedule and complete automatic tasks, but their brain has lost the map for complex movement.
So they have to rebuild the map.
Yes, and this brings us to neuroplasticity. The brain is incredibly adaptable, but it requires physical force and repetitive stimulation to trigger axonal sprouting.
Axonal sprouting, what is that?
It's when surviving neurons physically grow new branches to bypass dead tissue.
Oh, wow.
Jay and Jeff are aggressive because they have to forcibly stimulate Jason's peripheral nervous system to send desperate signals back to his brain, essentially forcing the brain to pave new highways.
Wow. So physical therapy isn't just about building muscle. It's literally forcing the brain to physically rewire itself.
Precisely. And that forced rewiring continues long after the patient leaves the hospital, moving into stage 8, the purposeful stage.
Which is when Jason goes home.
Yes.
And this part of the book is so incredibly mundane, but so emotionally massive.
It's a huge shift in context.
He gets discharged and goes back to his childhood house. He's lying in his father's old bed, surrounded by vertical striped wallpaper and this dark-stained 1980s furniture.
A very familiar environment.
Right. And he tries to do something as simple as take a sip of orange juice from a familiar glass. But his brain and stomach misfire, and he immediately spits it back up on the bedding.
His body just rejects it.
He has to rely entirely on an IV drip, on his mother Gloria, and on Willie, the Native American CNA who helps care for him at home.
That home transition is a critical biological and psychological hurdle.
Why is that? Because he's out of the hospital.
Well, the brain is now capable of purposeful action, and memory is returning to functional levels. But the familiar environment often highlights the patient's new deficits.
Oh, I see. He expects to be his old self.
Exactly. Jason returning to his childhood room, expecting his body to work like it used to, and realizing he can't even digest juice is a profound shock to the system.
He tells his mom, I'm all dried out inside.
Yeah.
It's just this heartbreaking realization that his body rejects basic nourishment. It's a grind.
And that grind defines stages 9 and 10 reintegration and long-term management. This is the attempt to transition back into society.
But the medical literature tells a pretty sobering story here, doesn't it?
It does. Only about 40% of severe TBI survivors make what is classified as a full recovery.
But what does full even mean in this context? If you reach stage 10, does that mean you are exactly who you were before the accident?
Almost never.
Really?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, because of that neuroplasticity we discussed, the brain has literally built new pathways. It is a different organ than it was before the trauma.
So they're a different person, biologically.
In many ways, yes. A patient might regain their independence, they might return to work or school, but their cognitive processing might be permanently slower, their personality might have subtle shifts, they are managing a newly wired brain.
That is the ultimate aha moment for me. We've traced this unbelievable journey from the absolute terrifying silence of a comatose state where a person is screaming into the darkness and hearing nothing but their own heartbeat, through the chaotic, short-circuiting transition of waking up with amnesia and agitation.
All the way to the brutal physical grind of forcing the brain to physically sprout new connections.
It is a phenomenal demonstration of human resilience. And the caregivers, the mothers like Gloria, the CNAs like Willie, they aren't just watching someone heal.
No, they're essential to it.
They are actively participating in the months-long, sometimes years-long process of helping a brain rebuild itself from the ground up.
It fundamentally changes how you view recovery. It's not about waiting for the old person to wake up and come back.
Right. It's about having this superhuman patience and empathy to meet the new person that the brain is biologically constructing.
A completely new neural map.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over today. Put yourself in that hospital bed for just a second. We all take the seamless connection between our mind and our body completely for granted.
We really do.
You tell your arm to move, and it moves. You drink a glass of orange juice, and your stomach processes it. We treat consciousness like a simple light switch on when we wake, off when we sleep.
But it's not a switch.
No. What if consciousness is actually a complex, incredibly fragile symphony of billions of neurons that takes months or even years to tune? Tomorrow morning when you wake up and you simply open your eyes, recognize your room, and stretch your arms. Take 1 second to appreciate the absolute biological miracle that just happened.
It is a symphony we conduct every single day without a second thought.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and we will catch you on the next one.